Episode 150 of Futures Radio Show, sponsored by CME Group, the world's leading and most diverse futures and options exchange. CME Group's markets help individuals and businesses around the world manage risk and seize opportunities. Learn more at futuresfundamentals.com.
Every day, traders and investors dive in to tackle the ever-changing markets to find opportunity. Futures Radio Show is your number one source for answers to the questions that all market participants want to ask. Veteran futures trader Anthony Crudele sits down with the most influential leaders and top traders in the industry. Now, here's your host, Anthony Crudele.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 150 of Futures Radio Show. I want to begin by thanking all of you for listening to Futures Radio. I also want to thank the great sponsors of Futures Radio Show, CME Group, Trading Technologies, and Top Step Trader. I am so excited about this milestone as we have a new ebook that you can download on futuresradioshow.com that's packed with great insight from our first 150 guests. Now today I had the extreme pleasure of speaking with Chris Hehmeyer, CEO of Hehmeyer Trading and Investments. I've been waiting to interview Chris since I started Futures Radio. He's a pioneer in the futures industry and one of the most humble and genuine individuals you will ever meet. Today, Chris and I spoke about the importance of keeping an open mind as markets change. Chris told us what he is currently focused on at Hehmeyer Trading and Investments. He also gave us an update on the Kottke Integration. Finally, Chris explains why he believes that cryptocurrencies are the next frontier. And just for fun, since Chris and I both enjoy the game of golf, I asked him who he chooses to play around with in the futures industry. As usual, thank you all for listening, and please enjoy this episode. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Listen, I've had this date marked on my calendar for a long time. I remember when I first started at CME Group in the mid-90s, a lot of my close friends, they started working for a firm that you were a partner in, Goldenberg, Hehmeyer. And I remember those days vividly. And I remember when I started Futures Radio Show, I was thinking to myself, you know what? I'd really like to go back and find out how Chris Hehmeyer started this firm, and so many of my friends had come through. I mean, look, you started in 1977. That was a pretty good year for me. It's the year I was born, so you've been doing this quite a long time, and you're a pioneer in the futures industry. I want to know how you got your start. Take us through that timeline. I know you were born in Memphis, Tennessee, came over here to Chicago, started at the Board of Trade. But walk us through that moment where you decided to get into this business, and then take us through to your modern role in running Hehmeyer Trading and Investments.
Okay, well, thank you, Anthony. The dilemma in college oftentimes is, what am I going to do when I get out of here, right? And sometimes that becomes real clear. I was thinking I might want to go to law school. I might want to go do this or that. And I did not get into the law schools I wanted to get into, and I never sent them a thank you note because I wasn't sure I really wanted to be a lawyer. But I had an older brother at the time who was at the New York Cotton Exchange in New York, and part of that came from growing up in Memphis, which I can tell you about. But Memphis is a big commodity trading town. And we had some family friends that said, you should go to Chicago. Chicago is where they are going to trade, and they're already starting to trade futures on money, futures on currencies, futures on interest rates, futures on mortgages, and then they're going to trade options on these things, and it's going to be big, just like they trade futures and options on corn and wheat. And so you should go to Chicago. I'd been to Chicago once or maybe twice because I had some family here. I had an uncle, my dad's older brother, and they had an extra bedroom, and so my dad called his brother and said, can your nephew come and spend the night in the extra bedroom? And he said yes. And I had some friends from Memphis who indeed were in the Ginnie Mae pit at the time in 1977. Bonds had not opened yet. And they opened in August, soon after I got here. And I went down to the Board of Trade. I just passed my 40th anniversary of arriving. It was in July the 31st. And so I went down to the Board of Trade, and this area was growing. It had momentum, and you could kind of feel it. And so I got a job as a runner. I started on the 2nd of August, and started in the grain room working for one of the grain companies, and then pretty quickly, within a month or two, got into the financial room, which was small and where I wanted to be. And I got a job soon after that in the fall as an out-trade clerk in the mornings and afternoons. So they would occasionally let me answer the phone, and I was slowly moving up to phone clerk. And in May of '78, the Board of Trade came out with a program, and the CME was doing something similar, where they had a permit program because they were trying to attract younger people, typically younger people, into the pit so that they would have bodies in there to make markets in the Treasury products. And this permit deal at the time was $2,500 a quarter for 3 years. So $10,000 a year for 3 years, total of $30,000. And at the end of the 3 years, if you met volume requirements, which were not real high, if you met volume requirements, you could pay another $10,000 and it would turn into equity and an associate membership. So I signed, they had 50 of these permits and treasury bonds, and 49 of what became friends and others and myself, we signed up for this treasury bond permit thing. And I was in the trading pit in treasury bonds starting in May of '78. I had to borrow the $2,500 for my first payment. I had to borrow $2,500 to put into my trading account. My clearing firm backed me. And I started filling orders in treasury bonds. And like I said, working in the afternoons and evenings and early mornings as a clerk in the back office. And after a couple of years, I was doing well enough that I could give that job up, and so and just focus on my pit duties during the day. And I moved into a new trading firm in '82, and in the beginning of it was '83, I think. They made a big push. This trading firm had a lot of grain clientele people, and they made a push into the financial room where this booming new market, rapidly growing new market was getting traction. And so I told them, I said, you're not prepared in the back office. And by the way, this was not rocket science, right? Anybody that had worked in the back office would have told them, you're not ready, you don't know the volume. And they assured me, we have been in the grain business for a long time, don't worry about it. Well, by the 3rd of January, they were out of balance, didn't know where they were, which is a really dangerous situation for any company that gets out of balance with their positions in the back office. And so the owner of the company came to me and said, would you help us get out of this? And again, it wasn't anything that was some sort of super effort. Anybody that had had that experience could have done it. But I said, the first thing you got to do is get these new guys out of here, send them back hat in hand to their old clearing firms. And so we stayed up all night long, ticking and tying the positions. We figured out where they were. They had lost about 10% of their capital, and they got out the next morning. And the owner of the company said, I'm very grateful. I'd like for you to buy 25% of the company and run the back office, run all the operations as the operations partner. I said, well, thank you very much. That's great, but I don't have $250,000 is what it was at the time. He said, we'll go over to the Continental Bank, and we did, and he co-signed a loan. I borrowed the money to buy the equity in this little trading company, and we sold it 2 years later in the summer of 1984. We didn't make a lot of money, but we made a little. And there was a partner there, a guy named Ralph Goldenberg, who was 20 years older than I am. And he said, what are you going to do? I said, I think I'll go back to the floor and fill orders. What are you going to do? And he said, I think we should open our own clearing firm. We should put our names on it. And he was the more senior guy and had more capital than I did. But we went in 50-50, and it was a general partnership. So we were both on the line, everything we had every day. And there were a couple of grain companies that we had as hedgers who did not want to do business with a small company, but they said, if you two guys are personally responsible for this, we'll do business with you. So we started with a good little book of grain hedgers and local traders, and we opened our doors January the 2nd, 1985. And we started building that company, and it had its trials and tribulations. And in the early 90s, we noticed that people were starting to trade in what are the U.S. off hours electronically. The Board of Trade had a system called Project A, and Globex at the time was competing, the CME and the Board of Trade were competing for these off-hours electronic systems. And we started putting people on these systems. And then in the late 90s, we pushed hard for a couple of our traders to give it a try at the German exchange, which was booming, growing rapidly. And this was in about 97, 98. So we had a couple of local traders who got into the Eurex trading with a mouse, on the screen pretty big. And you could see the volume just every day getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like what happened in the financial room in the late 70s and early 80s. You could see the volume growing. And the technology of trading on the screens was bringing a new way of trading. And so these guys with a mouse were better, faster, cheaper to some degree, although the technologies are never cheap, but cheaper in some ways. And so we did really well in that business. And then in about 2004, the automated guys did to the click guys what the click guys had done to the pit guys. And it became really automated. And so our FCM needed capital, needed to be bigger. So we sold the FCM and we kept the proprietary trading business. Ralph Goldenberg had then along the way moved to London, and he and I, after 25 years of being 50-50 partners, I'm proud of the fact that he and I still talk and occasionally get together and are still on good speaking terms after 25 years. A partnership like that has a lot of stresses and strains, but it was a really good partnership because we brought different points of view. Being the sort of young, waspy guy from Memphis and the old, wiser Jewish guy from Chicago, we together appreciated each other's viewpoints, and that's what good businesses often. I really believe in a diverse approach of thought into a business because you need to have different views. And there were certainly times where I would say something and he'd look at me like, "Where did you come up with that?" And occasionally I would shake my head and think, where does he see it like that? But if you're open to what the other person thinks, oftentimes for a business, that's the best way to run a business. And so since then, I merged the proprietary trading with another proprietary trading company called Harrison. We called it HTG. And last year when we acquired Kottke, we had HTG. We had a little CTA, commodity trading advisor called Janla. We had Kottke. We needed to rebrand the whole thing. We had a big meeting and Trump was taken. So we named it, a number of us said, "You've been around for a long time." I said, "Yeah, that's a polite way of saying you're old." But we named it Hehmeyer Trading and Investments. We have the prop trading, and we have some customers who are mostly former floor traders, many members. And so we try to give them a lot of service and support because they're professionals. And then we have the growing CTA business, which I'd love to tell you about.
Yeah, we're going to get into that in a moment, but I'm going
Hopefully
back to
that wasn't too much.
No, I loved it.
40 years.
Yeah, exactly. Well, looking back on your career, what hits me the most about what you've been able to do, stay out of the curve, adapt to the changes. I talk about this all the time on the show. People and traders, we're stubborn. We make money one way, we don't want to shift and change. How have you been able to stay ahead of the curve, or even, let's just say, change and adapt with the technologies over the year and say, hey, this is our business plan here, and now we're going to have to shift gears? I mean, you talked about how you got into computer trading before anybody was getting into it, and then you shifted in 2004, started getting into the algorithmic, and I don't know if you're doing HFT trading as well. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about what you're doing today, but how do you have that open mindset along the way to consistently stay ahead of the curve?
Well, I would describe it as standing on the street corner watching the traffic go by, right? If you just, I love Yogi Berra and all of his sayings, and he said you can observe a lot just by watching. And I think that's really true. You can, if you just look around and look at where things are happening or where something is mature, you can just look at it and say, oh my gosh, but you've got to sort of approach it with an open mind. You got to say this is, because change is not easy, but the one thing that doesn't change is that everything's changing, right? Everything is always in transition, everything. The universe, everything is in a state of change, and it's it is uncomfortable, certainly at times, to face change. That's the way life is. It's a wonderful thing. If we didn't have change, we wouldn't have babies and children and people growing. And so, but at the other end, of course, that means that we lose loved ones who pass along. And change is a part of human existence. And so you have to accept it and embrace it. But it's not easy, because you've done something a certain way, and you emotionally are tied to doing something in a fashion that has oftentimes has a romance about it. And those trading floors were tremendously romantic in their day, and a lot of fun. But it was hard work and loud and dirty. And I have some, excuse me, ADD. I don't know how much it is. I've never really been tested, but I think anybody that was drawn to a trading floor had some of that, right? This is not sitting in a booth with headphones on programming. No. That's a different sort of personality. But either way, and so I love the trading floors, and for me, letting the trading floor is still open, but watching the business leave the trading floor was not easy, right? Because it's like the big romantic train stations during the late 40s, where and now you go to Southwest Airlines and it's plane after plane after plane. It's like riding a bus from here to wherever, and the romance of it's gone. But the growth of the air industry is, the people that are in the middle of that's the growth place. And so, the analogies and examples are endless, but you've got to embrace change and be on the lookout for it.
So where do I even begin with this? Because, going back to when you had said having an open mind, embracing it, I go back to my days on the trading floor. I learned from pit traders. And at the time that I was learning, computer trading was just coming out. The E-mini S&P was just coming out. And I was getting backed because I had gone through a few of my own dollars, so I had to have other traders help me out. And I was just struggling in the pit, and I remember the people on the floor seeing me saying, hey, we have this new product called the E-mini S&P. You should try it out. And I remember having to go to my fellow floor traders that were helping me with funds. I had one specific mentor, and other guys were just helping me doing a little bit. I was doing checking trades and doing whatever I could to keep my head above water. Everyone was like, why would you want to do that? Booed, hissed me a little bit. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I was kind of forced into having to adapt and change because I couldn't make money in the pit, and I fully admitted it. It was like everybody else around me was doing extremely well. I just didn't fit into that. And I just said, you know what, let me go in and start trading, electronically. And over the years, because of that moment in my career, I've been able to have an open mind and change. I've changed styles. I've had a consistent foundation throughout the years, as I'm sure you have too in terms of your business. But having the openness to change and adapt, this business is always changing. If we're not adapting here, what are we doing, right? So that brings me to what you're doing right now. So this is where it gets exciting for me to hear about. You had this, you had acquired Kottke, and now what is it that you're focusing on at Hehmeyer Trading and Investments?
Well, we're of course focused on our core business, which are our traders. We at the trading side in the trading company have 26 different profit centers, and they range in size from one person who we still have, as I said, some market makers on the trading floor, make markets and options in commodities, live cattle and things like that, all the way to a 10-person group that's fully automated, extremely low latency, algorithmic, HFT, and everything in between. So we focus on supporting those people. Our mission there is to enable the success of our traders, and so that's our core business every day. We also focus, as I said, on our customers, and many of our customers are traditional professionals. Many of them grain traders and cattle traders, commodity traders, who through experience have a lot of knowledge about typical seasonal trades, reversions and cost to carry. So they put on cost to carry trades and seasonal trades, and they'll wait for the forces to slowly but surely come back into line. And so supporting all of them is a core part of our business. The managed futures side is the place that we're really focusing on in the traditional futures business. And that is, we have about $100 million under management. And we believe in what we like to say around the shop is there's riches and niches. In the managed futures business, about 75% of the assets are trend followers, and many of the trend followers, and there's all kinds of variations of trend followers, but many of the trend followers correlate highly to the trend following index, and you can get, an investor can get exposure to a trend following index with a beta product today. There's some very good products that are out there that you can get in mutual funds where you can get exposure to trend following and just pay 50 basis points a year. And so we're looking to try to add real alpha, and the managers that we look for are typically much lower capacity than some of those big guys. A lot of the reason that the assets that are there in the trend following is that you can deploy large amounts of assets. The smaller guys that trade lean hog spreads or gas oil spreads or crude oil curve or the yield curve, oftentimes those are smaller strategies, or strategies that can only deploy smaller amounts of capital, less than 50 million in notional or nominal. And so we love focusing on traders that have these niches and try to raise money for them. One of the things that we try to do for them, because they don't have big organizations, is give them support, the regulatory support, investor relationships, raise the money. We talk to the investors, we raise the money, we file with the NFA, and we're the CTA of record. So we do all, and give them all of their accounting and produce the monthly reports and the 13-column reports. We do all of that so they can just trade. And so that's managed futures, in my opinion, is an undervalued asset class, although some people don't like that term, but it's a place where you can really get enhanced returns if you get the right managers with low drawdowns, and you can boost returns. One of the things that we're doing from an innovative way is we've worked with an FCM, and now you can fund your account with an SPY or QQQ that'll give you beta exposure to the stock market while funding your managed futures. So it's an overlay, which is a common term for it. So if we can get a 5, 8, we love single high digits with low drawdown, 7, 8% return on top of, if somebody puts $1 million of SPY in there and they get 8 or 10 on their SPY for a year, and we can put another 8 on that, that's a nice product.
So Chris, here's the question I have for you right now. 40 years in this industry, you saw pit trading, point and click trading, algorithmic HFT quant trading. You talked about what you're currently doing. What is the next big thing?
Crypto.
So
it took me a long time to answer that question.
It took you, boy, you were ready for that one. What are your thoughts on the cryptocurrency space?
Well, it's the frontier. And it's, as we were talking in our office the other day, it's a little bit like crossing the Mississippi River in 1803. There are risks over there. There are Indians and snakes, and there's no lawmen, and it is wild. But there's also Dallas and Fort Worth yet to be discovered and founded and built, right? So this is the frontier. There's no answers, only questions. Once you get over there, you start asking questions, there aren't any answers. You're making them up as you go. And whatever you got with you is what you got with you when you get over there. The analogy only goes so far, but it's the frontier. The regulatory world is way behind, and that's not a criticism in any stretch, because the government is set up to move slowly. In many ways, that's a good thing, but it is going to take a while to catch up. The CFTC is actively involved in looking at it, and there's a couple of pieces out about the way that the CFTC looks at many of the assets that are being created that are mostly referred to as cryptocurrencies. I think they're much more like crypto commodities than they are like cryptocurrencies. But the the trading community and the global community that's involved with these things sees them as a way of exchanging value. To me, a currency, and for the most part, the legal structure says that a currency is legal tender, and the laws that surround currencies are different than the laws that surround property. So these are much more, to me, like a block of gold, and you shave off a little piece of your block of gold to buy a cup of coffee with it on your phone. So it's much more like a crypto commodity than it is a cryptocurrency, in my opinion. And so we're working on putting together a fund that's going to trade crypto commodities. Our plan is to register it as a commodity pool and trade it under our CTA and use the current regulatory structure for these products. But there are a lot of unanswered questions there. For instance, the 40% rules about being declared a securities mutual fund, there are crypto assets out there that are being distributed that are parts of a company that's an operating company. The SEC has yet to say that those are securities, but if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, to me it looks like a security. So we're going to try and stay away from our activities from trading securities. But there's nobody to go ask, right? There's no place to know for sure. And so we're going to trade these instruments that we think are, as I said, crypto commodities, not cryptocurrencies, but it's growing every day, it's moving, and it's actively attracting people. But there are risks and lots of unknown unknowns.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, I always look at it from a trader's perspective. You know, I'm putting money into the trade to trade these cryptocurrencies. I look at it as I don't know the future of what they are, but I'm going to trade the price action. And like you said, I have more questions about this space as well. Something I want to ask you before we get into our rapid fire segment questions, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. You know, you and I are both golfers. We talk about golf a lot when we chat, and we love the sport. I have my own dream foursome. You being 40 years in the space, if you could pick the 3 guys to play golf with in our industry, who would they be?
In our industry? Well, let's see. If it was anybody, and I got to meet her at an FIA conference, it wouldn't be a guy. It'd be a girl. It'd be Condoleezza Rice. That's where I would start. But she's not really in our industry. But because she spoke at the FIA, maybe we could consider her. She's a hero of mine. So, and I'd love to play at her club. And
you're talking about Augusta.
I
like to try and play there too.
I'd love to play with Condoleezza Rice. And it'd be fun to play with somebody like Faraday, or somebody that would have some fun. But let's see, in our industry, aside from my wonderful friends who I get to play with on occasion, and I don't know who some of the people are anymore, whether they play or not. But Harris Brumfield of Trading Technologies is always a blast to play with. I haven't played with Harris in 20 years. Harris insists that you have to play from the very tips of the tees to the ball in the hole. No gimmies, got to count every shot. And it's really interesting that will change the game a little bit for some people if they've got to try to make a 2-foot putt and it lips out. And so Harris is always a blast to play with. I am a big Mark Fisher fan. Mark Fisher in New York always has incredibly interesting things to talk about, and he's a terrific person, and he's always a lot of fun to be around and always fascinating. So Mark Fisher, I'd probably say, and this is probably clearly reflective of my age group, right? And so the last one is an old friend. I'd probably say Dennis Gartman is a really good player.
All right, great stuff.
In the industry.
In the industry, yeah. All right, everyone, our rapid fire segment is sponsored by Trading Technologies. You can trade the global markets from virtually anywhere with TT. They are the world's fastest commercially available futures trading platform. Create your account now and try it free at tryttnow.com. First question for Chris. How has your trading evolved over the years?
Trading spreads in the South Room at the Board of Trade in the late 70s with cards and pencils compared to sub 50 nanoseconds today means that it's all evolved as the technology has evolved.
Can you tell me the moment that trading started to click for you?
In the summer of 1978, somebody told me how to bid for one month and lean on the other month. And I was sold something, and I immediately bought the September, and I sold the December, and suddenly I got it.
What's the number one resource you spend your time on?
The number one resource I spend my time on is discussing with programmers whether we should be using Java or C++.
What's your favorite book about trading or the markets?
Over the years, it's been Mark Douglas's Trade in the Zone. It's the traditional book of the mental aspects of trading.
What's your favorite movie or TV show about trading or the markets?
Trading Places.
What's the best piece of advice you've received about trading or the markets?
I would say it's two things. A guy at the Board of Trade one time told me, if you see a line, get in it. A line of people. If you see a line of people someplace, get in it. And the other was do more of what works and less of what doesn't.
Now, if you can give a piece of advice to the young people interested in getting involved in trading, what would it be? Computer
science and programming is where so much of this business is. That hasn't yet really hit the crypto world. There's still people trading on their phones with a mouse. But the computers are running the activity.
Now, if you weren't in the trading industry, you'd be doing what?
I'd be a farmer, and particularly goat farming. I think goats are the animal of the future.
Now, Chris, everybody I'm sure is probably wondering, where can they learn more about what you guys are doing at Hehmeyer Trading and Investments? What's your website?
Hehmeyer.com, and it's under development. We're working hard to try to add some functionality so that you can track our managed futures programs that you were nice enough to ask me about. And so we've got a lot of work to do, and we're hoping to launch that in the next couple of weeks. But it's Hehmeyer.com.
Chris, it was an absolute honor having you on the Futures Radio Show today. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Futures Radio Show. If you have any questions or comments for myself or my guests, please visit futuresradioshow.com and sign up to be a premium member for free. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes.